Ambitious men are almost always on the go because that's really what you have to do to make it here in the United States. It's a high level of challenge. Men with money who have options will generally at some point exercise those options. And I was really around a lot of older men who were with significantly younger women. I have been flat broke twice in my life, and I know how that feels. And I know the feeling that all I need is money and all my problems will be solved because I was there. Okay, so there has been a lot of talk on the internet about all you have to do is marry a rich man and your life will be set. And I just wanted to add my input. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I'm just going to tell you the pathways that I've seen. And I say this as a person who worked in US healthcare for 20 years. 14 of those years were in New York City. I had some very, very high income patients, both from the United States and around the world. These comments are directed and focused mostly on Americans because that's what I'm most familiar with. I worked with a lot of really beautiful people from the Middle East, but I do not speak Arabic and I do not know their culture. So I felt like I was an outside observer. So I cannot comment on high income people from those countries. For that, I would refer you to Sadia Khan, who consistently works with high income people, probably throughout the world, but specifically in Dubai and in London. So this commentary is going to focus on the pathways that I've seen both in my personal life and also in my professional life. And I also want to put this in. I have been flat broke twice in my life, and I know how that feels. And I know the feeling that all I need is money and all my problems will be solved because I was there. And I never considered marrying a rich man because I knew what that would entail if I was simply marrying someone for their money. But let me give you the breakdown. And if you see me referring to my phone, I just made a few notes. First of all, people that are very high income, they don't want you to know that they have money, okay? 9.5 times out of 10, they want to remain anonymous. And that is because if people know that they have money, it's going to cause problems for them. People are going to ask them for things. They're not going to be able to move about freely. They know that they're going to have people in their lives that want something from them, but are potentially hiding it. So all this to say, if a man is telling you that he has money, there's a couple of things that you need to look out for. One, if he's telling you as a woman, and let's just use this as an example, as a beautiful 25-year-old woman or a 30-year-old woman who's in her prime, and he's telling you that he has money, I guarantee you that he's telling other women the same thing because he's using it as a tool to impress you. The second thing is, in my experience, the people that run around and say, I have money, they don't have any money, right? It's just a front. Please keep that in mind because that's a major pathway there. If the person really does have money, it's a problem because they're insecure, right? And so, like I said, they're running around telling everybody else the same thing. And if they don't get what they want or need from you, they're going to move on to the next person. If they are lying, then eventually you're going to find that out. So that's just something to keep in mind. In my experience, the people that have money don't talk about it. It causes less problems for them. All right, the second thing is there's a red pill guy, Rich Cooper. I'm going to be honest, I'm not a big fan of Rich Cooper, but I did watch his videos to get up to speed on red pill content. So when men approach me, and they started spouting things that didn't make sense, I could understand what they were talking about. And now I can spot red pill content pretty quickly. But anyway, Rich Cooper does say some things that I agree with. And one of the things he says for women is that if you want to marry a rich man, then you really need to work in a high income industry. And he suggested like high income jet sales. Well, all jets are high income, right? Boat sales. I think even being a flight attendant, that's going to expose you, especially if you're working in first class a lot. But you really need to pick an industry where you're coming in contact pretty regularly with high income people, because I can assure you it's a totally different world. And it's not a world that many of us are used to. It looks very beautiful and glamorous from the outside, but from the inside, I can assure you it's a totally different story. All right, so let me go through the 3 situations that I saw the most with people that have money. All right, so the first situation that I mentioned, it's the most ideal. And dare I say, it's probably the least amount of people that fit into this category. So a lot of times when I met self-made people that had money, they met when they were young, and the guy did not have money, but he was an extremely hard worker and he was extremely ambitious. And the woman saw that in him and she took a chance. And not only did she take a chance, they worked together to build their personal empire. Now, those people tend to stay together out of all the categories. And I'll tell you why. And there actually tends to be genuine love, caring, and compassion there. Because the man generally appreciates the woman and they have built something from the ground up. And the woman is integral to that. And there are many, many relationships that I've seen that have worked out in the long term that followed this pattern. So, okay, say you're a young woman, how are you going to spot this? Let me give you a couple of examples, all right? So, listen, if there's a 25-year-old guy and he's working 2 jobs and he's in school, I mean, that shows ambition right there. The thing is, these ambitious men, they don't have very much time, all right? So if you want the, quote, whole package, I want him to cater to me. I want stuff for my birthday. I need him to be available to me. Oh, and he has to have money too. There's going to be some things that you're going to need to compromise on, because some of these people are really amazing men, but they are busy like 20 out of 24 hours a day. They have stamina that not many people have. So you're going to be either cool with that situation or you're not. And once again, this is at maybe a more extreme end of the scale. But even if you meet a guy, let's say he's 21 years old, he's graduated from college, he's got a full-time job, you know, you can tell when people have it going on. Now listen, I'm just focused on the wealth aspects. There's like a lot of other aspects that you would want to focus on. Are you attracted to him? Is he attracted to you? Is there kindness, compassion, all that? Right now, I'm just focused on the financial aspects because I see so much of this on the internet. Another example is if the person's in law school or if the person, you know, is in med school. And I don't necessarily think that these, quote, mainstream pathways to professions, that's not the only way that you can become wealthy. I'm just using these as simple examples. However, if the guy's 25 years old and he's home playing video games, when he's got a job, you know, where he gets stoned before he goes to work, and then he kind of goes through the day like, yo, text, comes home, chills for a couple hours, rinse and repeat. I mean, a lot of times people that are in those situations that actually want to get a woman, they're going to talk a good game. Yeah, he's going to go to school. Yeah, he's going to get a better job. And, you might want to believe them, because at 25 years old, if a guy is good looking and has charisma, that can go a long way. So someone that is 25 years old and he talks a good game, but the reality is something different, then that's something that you're going to need to take a look at. And the other caveat I'll say is, I don't think there's any substitute for getting to know people over time. I had a comment where someone asked me, well, I've been dating this guy for 2 months, like, how do I know? And the one thing I'll tell you is there is no substitute for getting to know people over time. Now, sometimes you can weed out people pretty quickly in the beginning. I always recommend a very open, neutral attitude when talking with people, because I want to know truly who people are. And I don't necessarily have a judgment on that. And I think that was just from working in US healthcare for so long, because I assessed and interviewed so many people. But for yourself, you might want to ask yourself, do I want this person in my life? If they're doing drugs regularly, or they just have a mediocre job and they seem to be happy with that, is that something that you can accept? Ambitious men are almost always on the go, because that's really what you have to do to make it here in the United States. It's a high level of challenge. And so you're either okay with that or you're not. So that's the first category, where men and women meet relatively early in life. I would say under the age of 35, probably even 30. And you can see that person's a hustler. That person is really goal-oriented. They want to create a good life for themselves. And they're really looking for a woman that is willing to stick in with them and help them. So it's like this, right? That's really the foundation of a good relationship, all right? Two people really working together. Now, the second scenario also happens a lot within high-income circles. And for Americans, we like to believe that there's no class structure, but of course there is. And in places like New York City, you see the class structure pretty clearly, all right? And a lot of times people will tend to marry within their own social circles, within their own wealth circles, and they're not necessarily going to deviate too far out of that, especially for a first marriage, okay? So you're not necessarily going to see this guy from a high-income family marrying a woman who was raised in the projects. They do not overlap in New York City. It's relatively rare that class structures that are so different would socialize together. There were times in New York City where I would be sitting right next to a person that I knew is very high income, and I might say a few words to them, but they knew I wasn't in their class structure. They didn't have anything to say to me, and they are correct, right? Because I don't live that lifestyle. It's a whole specific lifestyle. And that's why you really need to get into it to understand it for yourself, so that you know what you're getting into. And they may like the woman, they may love the woman, and they may not. And I know that sounds kind of cold, but I've seen it be the truth. Like, a lot of times they're getting married at a certain age because that's what's expected of them. And they're like, okay, well, this girl's all right. She's here in the moment. Like, our families know each other. We go to the Hamptons together. We both have homes in the Hamptons, and we have a place on the Upper East Side or the Upper West Side. And it just works out. And this is extrapolated to other cities as well. Los Angeles, Miami. And of course, like, I'm just giving this as a general example, all right? Once again, there are many, many pathways. I'm just trying to give you some everyday examples so you know what to expect. So it really kind of is a question of not only wanting to be in these circles, but like breaking in and having people accept you. Now, if you're like a gorgeous 25-year-old woman who's got a huge Instagram following, well, yeah, that could work. It doesn't necessarily mean that a guy from old money is going to marry you, but it does give you an opportunity to break into these circles, I'm not going to lie. The third group are men who marry like what I would call trophy wives, right? So they are the drop dead gorgeous women who are not necessarily in that class. This tends to happen a lot for second marriages, although it can happen on a first marriage as well, where a man will become like absolutely smitten with a woman, and maybe he's like a 35-year-old guy and she's a 22-year-old woman. That's not really that huge of an age spread, and it's doable. And she's absolutely drop dead gorgeous and he has the money, and so that's a beautiful transaction made in heaven, and usually the intimacy is off the charts and everything is shooting stars, and that can go on for a number of years, right? Until perhaps the woman has children, until she gets a little bit older, and that man will then look to replace her. And I know that this is sad, but it's true. I can't tell you how many times I was at the bedside of an older, wealthy man, and the woman standing right next to him was easily 20 or 25 years younger. And so I would go in and I'd be like, oh, is this your daughter? I stopped asking that question because 9 times out of 10 they would be like, oh no, that's my wife. And I'd be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And you know, they were always really nice. They just were like, oh, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. I just stopped asking that question because I didn't know if it was his daughter, his wife, and this was a common occurrence, right? So what happens is men with money, when they have options, and once again, this is a general pathway. This is not everyone, but men with money who have options will generally at some point exercise those options. And I was really around a lot of older men who were with significantly younger women. A lot of times too, and this is another thing to mention, women want these men to be home and present, but these men are away a lot. I mean, they're constantly busy and in their careers. I mean, these are very high stress careers, by the way. So if you think you're going to lead this stress-free life, generally you're not. So what happens a lot for the second marriage is the man is away a lot and he's not seeing his family very much, unfortunately. And he winds up getting close to another much younger woman. It could be his assistant, it could be someone he works with. Yes, I know you're not supposed to, have affairs at work, but we know that it happens, right? So he'll wind up connecting with someone that understands what he's doing for work, understands the business that he's in, someone that he feels that is not only gorgeous, but there's some camaraderie. And that's one of the things about being a trophy wife is beauty and sexual attraction can only go so far, and then there needs to be something else to hold the relationship together. And if there's not, a lot of these women are easily replaced. And I want to jump into one of the things that there's this, I would call it a lie, but what red pill people like Rich Cooper say is, well, all you have to do as a woman is just file for divorce and you're going to get 50% of the assets. All right, I want to say I'm not an attorney, but what I will say is that's honestly not what I saw. I would call that a bold-faced lie. What I saw is that these men are not going to hand over assets and income and money that they worked so hard for. They're not just going to easily be like, oh, okay, you want a divorce? Oh, here you go. All right, honey, you know what? Like, how does 20 million a year sound? And then we could do another 10 million for the kids. Is that enough? Honey, look, in the event of a divorce, it's going to be like going to war. Now, once again, I'm not going to sit here and say it's all divorces, but these men are running corporations. These men are very high level when it comes to business, right? Usually speaking. And if you think that they're going to turn around and be kind, considerate, and compassionate when you decide that you've had enough of their mistreatment, of their potential mistreatment, because I'm not saying that all high-income men are like this, but if you go ahead and divorce one, you're going to find out who that person really is. That's what I'm going to say. And it's not going to be an easy road to hoe. And, you know, if you've had a different experience, please put it in the comments, all right? These are just my observations. They're not set in stone. I just want people to consider these things because I feel like people are really under the veil when it comes to this situation. And there's too much propagation on social media of flat out lies, to tell you the truth. And so that's another thing about this high income world, because people want both things. They want the money, but they want the luxury, but they also want the person to be soft, kind, and compassionate. And I'm sorry to say this, but, and this is, once again, not all high income people. I've met some beautiful high income people. They generally tend to keep a low profile though, okay? As you go up the social ladder, and social standing and materialism means more, then kindness, compassion, and empathy tends to decline. Why? Because your focus is on your assets, it's on generating revenue. These men in their everyday life have to be tough as nails, and that's really hard to turn off. And I'm not justifying any man's mistreatment of a woman. I'm not at all, but I'm just saying that if you're at it, dare I say, if you're really grinding at it, which a lot of these people do for business, and you're really busy and you're really focused the majority of your time, that's going to be really hard to turn off and to be this soft, kind, compassionate person. The people that generally have the most empathy of these categories of men are the ones that met their wives early, they truly love them, and they truly respect them. A lot of these marriages, as they progress over time, from what I've seen, are just marriages in name only. So there was one time I met a guy, he was in his 80s, he was a really cool guy, and his wife must have been in her 60s. And she was really nice as well, and I could tell that they had like a genuine relationship. And I had such a beautiful conversation with them, and I was just left their room and I was just like, wow, they're an actual couple. Because a lot of times that really wasn't the case. You could tell like they were married but not really married, if you know what I mean. There were times when I would walk in the hospital room and some of the women would be so insecure because I, at the time, was a younger woman, and they would really have an insecurity around their husbands being around younger women because they knew that they were middle-aged and that their husbands were eyeing and probably, dare I say, involved with younger women. So this type of high-income society, in my opinion, is not for the faint of heart. The final group that I want to speak about are the men and women who usually they'll both have pretty like high-powered corporate jobs, and they'll meet relatively young, like under 30, like maybe they work for the same organization, maybe they're in the same profession. Like for example, this is an easy one. If you're studying to become a doctor and you're doing your residency, a lot of people meet during residency because they're always at the hospital, right? And so they'll meet during their professional training, or they'll meet at work, and they're both like very, very high-powered people, okay? Now, sometimes both will elect to stay in their respective professions. In my experience, though, once the woman has children, she'll either scale back to part-time if she can, or the other thing that happens is she will quit altogether and she will become the household manager. And so you have the man, the very high income man, earning, let's say, anywhere from 300,000. I mean, I know this is going to sound crazy, but 300,000 for a family in New York, if you actually like want to own something, it isn't really that much. So let's just say the man's earning $500,000 on up to 10 million, and that's a large stretch. And she'll stay home and she'll manage the household, because literally it is a complete managerial position between managing the children's activities, managing the property, any assets. And I have seen those marriages work out because essentially the wife steps in and now becomes the household manager, and they're really like working together, and the husband really needs her because he is constantly focused on his career. Now you might think, well, that sounds like a great position to be in. I mean, yeah, but it's also stressful. It really is, because the other thing is too, and I don't think that this is discussed enough, but that's a lot of stress on the man. If he's like the sole income earner, and a lot of times in these situations, I've seen maybe they're making from like 300,000 to a couple million, 2 million or so. And that, once again, that sounds like a lot, but for places like New York City or Los Angeles, any place where you actually want to own something, and yes, of course, you can get by on that amount of money. Please don't get me wrong, but it can also go really quickly. So that's a lot of stress for him, and hopefully his wife relieves some of that stress by taking the pressure off, by managing everything else, so he can focus on what he needs to focus on to accumulate the assets and to bring in the income. All right. Now, sometimes those marriages implode, though, because it is a lot of stress on both people. And the other scenario, which I don't see happen very often, to be honest, especially once the family has children, is where both high income earners stay in their professions. And once again, please comment down below if you're like, no, I've seen this or that. Like any honest comments would be appreciated, because I just feel like I want to get realistic information out to younger people who have been sold this lifestyle but don't really know what they're getting into. But anyway, if you have two high income earners and they choose not to have children, like sometimes it can work out, or if they only have like one child. But it can get really overwhelming with both people working very demanding professional jobs and then basically having like no one to manage the household. So things can get kind of chaotic really quickly. To wrap up, there are 4 groups that I've come across of couples who are in the high income category. Okay, so I wanted to give you this summary page because I think it's important. All right, so these are the realistic pathways to marrying high income men. They are certainly not all inclusive. This is just what I've experienced in my time working with wealthy people and also in my personal life. So number 1 is the couple meets when the man is young, usually under the age of 30, but up till the age of 35, and they work together to build their personal empire. Number 2, a man from a wealthy family will marry a woman within his own class structure. And I found that to be especially true for a first marriage. For a second marriage, a lot of times they will deviate from that, and they may marry someone significantly younger that they either meet through work or through some type of business venture. Number 3, some men will marry a trophy wife, meaning he has the money, she has the looks, it's initially a match made in heaven, but oftentimes these marriages will implode as time goes by. Number 4, high-powered professional couples do certainly get together. They tend to meet also a little earlier in life, age 35 and under, and they will marry. And usually when the couple has children, the woman will either scale back on work or she'll quit altogether and she'll become the household manager. And once again, please write in the comments if you've seen things differently. I would love to hear from you. Okay, important things to keep in mind. High income people don't talk about their wealth, so especially when they first meet you, but I know some extremely high income people. I've known them for a long time and they never talk about their wealth. So if a guy that you first meet is talking about how much money he has, that's a red flag. Number 2, in the event that you marry a high income man, if you decide to divorce him, it's going to mean adversity for you. Number 3, increased wealth can mean decreased kindness, caring, and compassion. It doesn't happen all the time, but I do see that it occurs, and you're especially going to see this if you get a divorce or if things are not going well within the marriage. So hopefully this video will help you with some pragmatics of dating and marrying high-income men. Thank you for watching this video.